time to turn to Gaelic games. Sarah Donovan, former All-Ireland winner with Cork, current Dublin coach. Good morning to you, Sarah.
Good morning, how are you?
Good, plenty to get into here. We'll come to the hurling in just a few minutes, but the Camogie obviously has caught the attention over the last few days, over the last week or so. Players obviously wanting a split season here, just to catch anybody up on this who hasn't been following it. The Camogie Association suggesting a league, club championship and inter-county run out for discussion at the minute with members, and as we stand, the league is to start I think in about 10 days time or thereabouts. Vast majority of players who have been surveyed say they're not going to play it. How is all this going to get sorted?
Right now, I think the best thing that the Camogie Association did was pause and take a breath. Unfortunately, for the likes of the sponsor, Littlewoods, it's not great the week before a league knowing that you can't have access to your players for league promotions per se. And for us as obviously managers and coaches, not knowing whether it's going to go ahead and trying to plan and train for it. So I think, though, it's the right decision to go out and poll the club players. So you'll know from last week, the GPA announced that 84% of the players have said they won't be playing the league if it stays in the current format. And the Camogie Association have finally taken and listened to the players and said, right, we will go to our club players and counties now and ask what's going to happen. That's a 7-day window. We're hoping that we see white smoke by Sunday, but, you know, we've got no clearer on it.
Yeah, and like you're hoping all the information obviously gets to the players and that due process is seen by those county boards and that the responses come in, whatever that might be. But like there is a possibility after all of that members vote for the original Camogie Association option. If that happens, do you think that players and counties are going to sort of row in behind it and get on with it, or how would you see that playing out?
As much as they'd like to get in behind it, I don't think it's feasible, a calendar, regardless of the ins and outs of it. Like Jimmy Greville, the Cavan manager, spoke yesterday in an article with the 42 and said half of his Cavan team play dual, they're dual footballers. So with the calendar as it currently is, the ladies footballers are due to play throughout the summer and the Camogie aren't due to play till after September. That means the ladies footballers won't be available to the club teams in Cavan. And that's the same across the board. I think the naivety of clashing the ladies' football calendar and the Camogie calendar, despite all this chat of taking into account the dual player in the year 2021, it hasn't happened.
Why does this happen so often, Sarah, that we have a new story to focus on when it comes to the Camogie Association, particularly on the theme of the dual player and how they're being screwed over on a routine basis? So, like, what is the genesis for this?
I think it boils down to power. I think the intertwined nature of the two organisations is being disregarded. I would say at the moment, the Camogie Association looks like it's blatantly disregarding its players and the Ladies Football Association, because last Wednesday, the Ladies Football Association had told the Camogie Association that they were going with the GA, they were going with a split season, and then on Friday, 2 days later, the Camogie Association announced they were doing the opposite. So it's not like they were avoiding each other. The Ladies Football Association had clearly marked out their territory. Now, if you know that your players are going to be involved in another season at the exact same time as you're trying to plan your club season, you'd think that you would put that into consideration.
There's been a lot of talk, obviously, over the last couple of years about bringing everything under the one umbrella. I get the sense from what you're saying there that if one of the two organisations was going to go inside the tent with the GEA first, it would be the LGFA over the Camogie Association. I
think commercially right now, the LGFA are in a much stronger position, and I think there was a fall off of 100k in sponsorship for the Camogie Association last year because of COVID, obviously. They don't have a sponsor this year for the Liberty, or they had Liberty as the sponsor last year for their championship. They don't have a sponsor this year for their championship, and maybe that was the reason they were looking to kick the championship into September to try and get themselves a sponsor in advance of the championship starting. But as a sponsor, would you genuinely want to row in behind an organisation that can't manage its players or structure?
You mentioned Jimmy Greville there in the comments that he had in relation to where his squad are at the minute. You're obviously involved with Dublin. What are the types of conversations? I presume there's a lot of sideways eyes emojis making their way into your WhatsApp group. What's the thinking?
Well, you know what? For the first time, there's probably joined up thinking, because the 12 county managers met last week and spoke about the fixtures calendar. I suppose from Dublin's point of view, and I note I was reading about Limerick hurlers today. We've been with the players for the last, say, 14 weeks, right? 13 weeks. This is week 14. So 11 weeks, the players were training individually, upwards of 5 times a week, doing their own gym sessions. For the last 2 weeks, they've been in with us. It's not that they've just decided to start playing now. Their commitment has been long running. And the managers met last week and said, look, if we're looking to engage with them for the next 7 weeks, which brings it up to the 21st of June, which is the league final, and then we let them back to the clubs to play their club championship. We bring them back in again in September to play the All-Ireland Championship. You're looking at upwards of 45 weeks where the players have to be engaged with us as county managers and coaches. I just don't think that's fair on the players to have that level of engagement for that length of time. Nobody should be forced to do that. And that's what the county managers spoke about last week. There has to be a cut-off point for players. And that's why the split season works, because if the split season happened, we would have the players for a period of 20, 25 weeks, and then they would be back to their clubs and they wouldn't have to think about us anymore.
And like, as of today and this weekend, what are you planning for? What are you training for?
Right, we've training this evening, and we have challenge matches set up for the weekend. We're trying to pick a team. Like, obviously, we have 44 players into the team this year, into the panel. This is a brand new panel, essentially, for us, and no more than the men's setups. We're trying to get a look at new players. We're trying to set up for Kilkenny on the 15th of May, the All-Ireland champions, and no bigger test for a team than Kilkenny. So we have to be blinkered about this. We have to say we're going to be playing that match on Saturday, and we're hoping that the Camogie Association wants us to play that match on Saturday. And in order to do that, they have to facilitate the calendar.
Is it too simple a thing? Like, obviously, Sarah, there's been a lot of chat about the GPA and the WGPA merger, and maybe the Camogie Association, the LGFA, and maybe at some point down the track, the GEA as well, and that it just becomes one governing body. Is it too simple a fix to think that is just going to sort everything, and that these things won't be a constant source of conversation, or are we missing something?
Well, fundamentally, it has to happen, because I don't think it's sustainable with the Camogie Association and Ladies Football Association sitting outside of the GA. The Camogie Association said that in October or November they'll struggle to get flooded pitches. They won't have access. Ultimately, you need access to the facilities to play your sports. Going under the GA umbrella, they would have access to these. So while power is what I think this is all about, I think down the line it has to become one organisation, and then everyone will improve, and it is as simple as that,
It'd fix all those conversations about, like, Micheál Martin and Shooty here during the week about funding and equity and all of those sort of things with one fell swoop.
I think so. Like the Dublin Camogie Board are probably paying in the region of $2,500 a month for rent, to put their players onto the pitch, because they don't have access to their own pitches. That's the same for a lot of inter-county teams in female sports. That's a big outlay. That's big income, So I think if the government funds were, as you said, equitably distributed, and the GPA, I suppose, at this point have great oversight over what the WGPA haven't gotten in the past. And I think these conversations with government would be much more positive, and with the GA as well, much, much more positive.
Yeah, it's going to be really interesting to see what happens over the next little while. Sarah, we did want to chat to you about the hurling that actually starts this weekend in the national leagues. There is a sense that this is going to be one big phony war, but at the same time, once the ball is thrown in on Saturday evening, I suspect that everybody's going to be like, yes, hurling is back, and everybody's all of a sudden going to read into every little wrinkle that appears at the weekend.
I think so. Look, Saturday evening's game, Limerick and Tip. I'm very excited about it. Obviously, again, then Sunday you've Cork and Waterford. My heart is obviously more in that game. But with Limerick and Tip on Saturday, you've the 2019 champions versus the 2020 champions. I think Tip will be a little aggrieved. Limerick have just outshone everyone, and all of Tip's, I suppose, prowess in recent years has kind of been forgotten, because Limerick are just so slick. They've obviously gone with 9 of their starting team from last year's All-Ireland final. Notable absences: Declan Hannon, Aaron Gillan, Cian Lynch is on the bench. So I think there is obviously new players coming into the Limerick setup, but going with 9 of last year's team suggests that John Kiley wants to keep the foot on the throat of the tip lads as best he can for an opening round game that doesn't necessarily hold that much importance.
Yeah, there was a feeling 2 years ago when they were last defending champions that Limerick had done exactly that. They kept the foot on the throat of everybody who came up against them in the league. I remember they hockeyed Waterford in the league final that year in particular, and whatever happened, the summer came along, and obviously that Kilkenny game occurred. And I just wonder, is that one of the biggest outliers we've seen in recent years in hurling, that defeat to Kilkenny, or was there something about the Limerick mentality that year that was just off a bit after being champions?
Look, I think no more so than Liverpool in the football this year. You can be absolutely exceptional, and then the following year you can dip. Players learn a lot from defeat. I know they say you learn from as much from defeat as you do from winning, but that is true. I think Limerick won't want that feeling that they had after losing to Kilkenny and getting caught. So I think they've even gotten stronger since that defeat. And unfortunately for Tip and Cork and Galway, Limerick aren't slowing down. That's for sure. It's like this conversation as well around how Limerick managed to get to this point as well, about the resources that are gone in there, the hurling takeover in certain parts of the city. And we were having this conversation with Michael Verney yesterday about how they're in a position now where the Dubs were at in football over the last few years and Kilkenny and the Naughties were at, where they just need 1 or 2 quality players to come through. They had that last year, and I think early sounds from this year that that's exactly what's going to happen as well this year. Yeah, well, looking at the team on Sunday, Richie English is back. I think Richie English is a phenomenal cornerback. So to be able to have him return to Limerick only makes them stronger. William O'Donoghue's captain. William came late to the party, I suppose, but was phenomenal last year. Yeah, I suppose you're talking about players adapting to a system, and the system is very well explained. No more so with Dublin this year. We're obviously trying to implement a system. It's going to take a couple of years for that to get up and running, and then you start to bring players in and you plug them into the system, and then it becomes fun. The hard yards were done by Limerick 3 years ago. You say your heart is in the Cork versus Waterford game on Sunday. There's been a hell of a lot of change under the radar in Cork hurling over the course of the winter. Yes, and look, I suppose the first noticeable change will be Anthony Nash in goal. Goalkeepers in Cork have been quite vocal or visible in the last 10 years, and Nash stepping away before Christmas means that there's a changing of the guard. And when we talk about, how important goalkeepers are, you're talking about puck out strategy, winning your own puck outs, winning opposition puck outs. That'll be a big change for both Waterford and Cork on Sunday. That noticeable change. Stephen O'Keefe won't be in goal for Waterford, and Anthony Nash won't be in goal for Cork. Patrick Collins, it looks like the front runner from Ballinhassig stepping in, and now Patrick has been with the quad 6 years, but has had to be obviously understudy to Nash for all of that time. I think everyone will be getting used to the state of play in Cork, but ideally you'd be hoping that the likes of Patrick Horgan will be still firing on Sunday, because they will need some of those, I suppose, more established players to get them over the line now that they've had such change. Could I just ask then, from the conversations you might have had over the course of the winter and the last couple of winters around Cork hurling, are those conversations quite rootless, or is it quite negative around the state that Cork hurling is in, or is there almost a state of acceptance at this point that has seeped in that the decade did go by without an All-Ireland? I think, what was it, the first time in 12 decades that they hadn't got an All-Ireland title. They sort of moving down the rungs of the ladder despite the lofty expectations that the county has. Oh no, we haven't accepted anything, I don't think. What I would say is that, look, they're constantly searching for new ways to try and break that hold that's I suppose happened in Munster with Limerick and Tip. And look, if you look at Waterford beat Cork twice last year, so Waterford are even ahead of Cork at this stage, which will hurt a lot. The club championships in Cork haven't necessarily reflected the inter-county teams of old. Blackrock winning obviously the championship last year was brilliant for Blackrock, but it's taking time for club players to actually make that break into county teams, and there doesn't seem to be a kind of a joined up thinking. The UCC teams seem to dominate the Cork teams, and I don't know, is that having an impact? I think if you had stronger club players, involved in the county teams, you'd have more success.
You mentioned about Anthony Nash walking away, and there's more gone as well, obviously, Sarah, and some of them have walked away, it seems, and some of them have been walked to the door. There's Aidan Walsh gone, Christopher Joyce, Connolly Hahn. It's a new broom, obviously, here from Kieran Kingston. He was talking the end of last year, about taking Cork to the next level, and he's certainly gone all in.
Connerly Hahn's absence will be one that will be hard to fill. Connerly Hahn would have been in his heyday kind of 10, 11 points a game. That's what we would have expected from him. Phenomenal athlete and a phenomenal talent, but time catches up with everyone, unfortunately. I do think, the sweet spot seems to be the 25-year-old mark, and that's what the majority of the players, are in terms of age. And I suppose it's commitment as well. The older players have to live their lives, and they have to move on at some point. I don't know, is it worse to be pushed or to get to walk out yourself? But I think it was time for change. I think you can't have the same conversations with people. 2013, obviously would have been Cork's most successful year with that group of players, and having nearly got there but not getting there, that tends to play on players' minds 7 years later. And probably there was a sense of that tiredness in those players.
And then there's also the 2018 scenario, which like 2013, as you say, is obviously the big one from recent history when it comes to Cork. But I just wonder, in the context of Limerick being quite dominant at the moment, do Cork people look back on 2018 and that unbelievable semi-final as a bit of a crossroads in the lifespan of this team?
I think it boils down to organisation. There's no question that on that day Limerick had a better game plan, and I think Cork, individual talent is unquestionable in Cork. But then, we obviously went, I was in Croke Park for Cork and Kilkenny in 2019. For the first 15 minutes, you'll remember Cork were absolutely pinging balls around Kilkenny, and they didn't know how to get up to the pace of it. And I was going, God, this is going to be a handy quarter-final. And Kilkenny came out in the second half and absolutely turned us over. Individual talent accounts for a lot, but it doesn't account for enough. You have to have a game plan with it.
Yeah, well, Cork are going to be a fascinating watch. They've Limerick in the Munster semis as well, obviously, so making hay now might be the wisest possible thing they can do, and plenty of changes in the backroom staff as well.
They have 5 league games to get organised for the Limerick game. Look, no more than us playing Kilkenny next Saturday week. You might as well go out from the start and know what you're up against, so the harder the better.
Yeah. What, Cork or Waterford?
I'm going to go with Cork.
It doesn't sound like much faith there. It sounds like you're just going to throw it out there. Listen, thanks a million. We'll keep an eye on events over the next little while as well on the Camogie front. Thanks a million for joining us this morning.
No worries. Thanks, guys.